We're just going to give it a few minutes for everybody to come on in. Lane, let me know with a nod or when you're ready to go, and I'll get us started.
Nick, you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm as ready as we're gonna get.
We're gonna get started. We have Nick Stallings and Lane Amaro with Understanding the Disabled Audience.
Thank you, Christina, and welcome to the second in the Storefront to Web Accessibility series. And the next 3 sessions, so today, tomorrow, and Thursday, are going to focus on web accessibility. So if you joined us yesterday when we introduced ourselves, got to know us a little bit, and we also kind of went over some of the many reasons why it would be a good idea to consider web accessibility as well as your storefront accessibility. And when we talked about web accessibility, we were talking about the web experience that people see and hear. So as we go on through today, we're going to be taking a look at how the members of your audience, so when you're on the web, that could be any demographic, anyone who has the ability to access the internet. So that audience can be extremely diverse and is much less limited to the demographic that you might find in a physical storefront. So, and again, thank you for joining us. And Christina and Lana, thank you for inviting Nick and I. I know we're both really excited to be going through this. And like yesterday, I will apologize in advance if I sneeze. If I'm teary-eyed, it's not because I'm super emotional about the content, although it is something I'm passionate about. I'm dealing with consequences of all this smoke in the air here in Boise, our poor air quality. And so I will apologize in advance if I have to suddenly stop and get a drink or blow my nose. And I promise to attempt to mute or turn off the video so you don't have to see that. Our objectives for today, we want to help you understand how different types of disabilities can impact your audience members. And on the web, again, that can be an extremely diverse audience. You have the potential to reach a lot more people outside of a physical geographical area, like a storefront. And then we're going to identify really the most powerful tool that you already have in your toolbox to help make sure that everyone, including individuals with disabilities, have access to your web resources. And then hopefully we can develop 3 different strategies for accomplishing and using that very powerful tool. I say I hope because Nick and I are both very passionate about accessibility, but we're going to also talk about assistive technology today. And again, that is something that both of us, I being blind, use assistive technology every day. And Nick working at the Idaho Assistive Technology Project, Assistive Tech, or AT being in the title of that. I think we get even more excited about the assistive technology and the toys sometimes. So when we demonstrate these, we get a little carried away. So I hope we get as far as strategies. I'm going to start with the different types of disabilities that internet and web users might be using to access devices and to access what you're posting on the web, whether it's a point of sale type of environment, a web store, or if it's a blog, or if it's just social media. Amaro AT Consulting, I simply have a business Facebook page. I don't even have a full website for what I'm doing because it would take too many resources for me to juggle at this point. So, because one-man shop here. So those different types of disabilities that your viewers might have include visual, auditory, motor, and cognitive. And we're going to dive into those a little bit here. So visual disabilities or visual impairments can range from difficulty simply processing things that you see, all the way to total blindness and not being able to see anything at all. So you could have perfect 20/20 vision, which we are all familiar with, the, 20/20 being perfect vision, but not be able to really understand what you're seeing. And that falls into both the visual impairment and cognitive impairment category. But it ranges on a spectrum from everything from 20/20 vision, but trouble comprehending what you're seeing, to total blindness, being able to see nothing at all. And when we talk about your web resources, this means that people, are going to have difficulty accessing information that is conveyed only by a visual means. So if you have text that says something like, click the red button to begin, someone who cannot see the color red, who might be colorblind, who might not be able to see at all, would not know what button to click because they can't see the red. That red is a visual indicator only. Or if they said something like, click the button below. This is not as obvious sometimes as color. You're like, oh yeah, some people can't see color. The click the button below is kind of a relational thing. They'd have to be able to see what is below or to the left or to the right, or be able to comprehend direction. So those types of things would be things that you might want to avoid discussing or using as text on your web pages and that kind of thing. People with visual impairments can use a variety of different tools. Like I said, they're on a spectrum there, from having some vision, maybe only color blindness, maybe being able to see just fine at the beginning of the day, but it's blurry at the end of the day. Many of us are probably experiencing screen fatigue at this point. If you've been working from home for a length of time and spending a lot more time on your computer. This is one reason I choose to use the white text on a black background for my slides. In general, it's a little less strenuous on the eyes. So I'm gonna stop screen share here. I'm gonna switch over and demonstrate a couple of, let's see if I can. There we go. And I'm going to switch over to show my iPad and show two of the options that are available for people with blindness and low vision on the iPad. All right.
One notification. Notifications. Do not just 1:08 p.m. Control center. Airplane mode. Switched button. Off. Screen mirroring button. In progress. Apple TV button. Zoom Memorial. Samsung Zoom Memorials. Zoom Memorials.
All right.
Zoom Memorials button.
So took me a moment there, but we've got my iPad screen up now. And on the iPad, there's a variety of accessibility options. If you go into settings,
Word button. Shift vision accessibility.
and you can choose accessibility on the left-hand panel. I don't think it's showing it right here on the left-hand side, but the accessibility screen is showing on the right.
Physical and motor vision heading.
Under the vision heading, there are several tools, and you're hearing VoiceOver. This is the text-to-speech screen reader, and it reads everything that is text. If there was an image, it wouldn't necessarily tell me what it was. But there are other options in here, and Nick and I tested this earlier. Zoom doesn't work when I do a screen share, so you guys, I can't show you that.
VoiceOver on button. Zoom on button. Magnifier off button. Display
I'm
and
going to go
text
into
size
display
button.
and text
Hold
size.
accessibility.
And in display and text size, there's a whole lot of different options that I can enable.
Increase contrast off. Differentiate without color. Replaces user interface items that rely solely on color. Rows 6 to 13. Color filters can be used. Classic invert. Classic invert
I
off.
wanted to show one feature,
Smart invert off on.
the smart invert feature. So that's available on the iPad as well. If you are making web resources, including apps for mobile, you want to make sure that the app can support these built-in accessibility features though, because the app can be made not to support them. So just because the iPad has the ability to turn on high contrast doesn't mean it will work in every app. All right. Switch back my screen share. When a screen reader user is using a device, oftentimes it takes them a little bit longer to find things. As you noticed, it took a little longer for me to find that checkbox to turn on the smart invert than it might have for someone who could spot that checkbox and had hand-eye coordination. So that's another thing to consider as well. Your users may not be able to interact with things in a specific time limit. I'm going to move on to the second category of disabilities, deaf and hard of hearing. Again, we are going to consider that individuals are going to be on a spectrum of their ability to hear and comprehend. Someone might have perfectly good hearing, but have difficulty separating specific sounds or understanding speech patterns, but have absolutely nothing physically wrong with their ability to hear. And then they could be completely deaf and not be able to hear anything at all. So again, everything's on a spectrum. When we talk about how this impacts their ability to interact with your web content, means that anything that is conveyed via audio means only is not going to be accessible to them. Some of the examples that I run across sometimes, occasionally include CAPTCHA challenges that say type what you hear, and you have to click a play button and there's audio only. Now with CAPTCHAs, you can, they're meant to be text-based, image-based to start with. So most people are not familiar with that one. But if there is a timed type of challenge, or if you have created video content to promote something related to your organization, business, or personal brand, say like a trivia show or that kind of thing, and there are tones that indicate correct answer or wrong answer, and there's nothing else that indicates incorrect or correct or start or stop, it's only an audible sound, those things would not be known and experienced by someone with a hearing impairment. And there's a lot of different tools available to individuals who are hearing impaired, including hearing aids and other FM loop type systems, that kind of thing. But a lot of what individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing rely upon are environmental accommodations that have been made. And I am going to show you one of the things that I sometimes use as a presenter, typically in person, to assist those in the audience who might be deaf or hard of hearing, or who may simply rely on text. So for anyone who's using closed captioning, be aware that you may end up with duplicative captioning. Our captioner, I hope, will continue so that anyone will not miss anything, but I do want to show those who are able to see it. And Microsoft PowerPoint has a subtitle feature that apparently is not available to me right now. It's not available to me right now. That is weird. It has a feature, and you know what? I think I know why. But there is a feature that would allow PowerPoint to automatically interpret what I am saying and display that open on the screen. For a lot of people, though, that automatic captioning is not very accurate. We'll dig more into that on Thursday's training. But if you're interested in checking out captioning in general, throughout any of our sessions, you can click your closed captioning button and see real-time live captioning by a trained professional who is going to be far more accurate than our automatic possibly could be. I'm going to turn it over to Nick to talk about other the motor impairments and cognitive impairments and do some demonstrations as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Elaine. Everyone hear me okay? It looks like it's working well. Good. So I just wanted to make a note too regarding Elaine talking about the subtitles and captionings. That's actually a plugin through Microsoft PowerPoint that's available in Office 365. So anyone who's using the new subscription-based Microsoft Office will have access to that. Shoot us an email or shoot us a message if you are interested. We can easily wrap around and I'll show you guys that. Pretty straightforward there. But moving on to the fine motor control, one of the things we wanted to highlight is the spectrum. You know, there's no guaranteed any one way that someone's going to access content. And what I thought I would show off here is move my camera. One of the things I've come across quite a bit here is what's called this head. It's a head stylus. So you can see here, it actually connects to your noggin. And I can switch my camera back around so that way you guys can see me if I was wearing it. It would actually be on my head here. And you think about someone who doesn't have the use of their hands or someone who has really bad tremors. This could be the only way that they're going to access something. So by actually selecting and using their hand, I have a gentleman who uses an AAC device this way. He uses his entire Mac computer this way. And so when you're thinking about double clicks, when you're thinking about small click boxes or submit buttons, sometimes that can make a big difference for someone who's, you know, using, say, a head stylus, something like that. So it's really not about designing things specifically for an individual, but taking this into consideration when you are designing your spaces. Another good example I like here is, this is called the roller ball joystick. You guys can see it's got 3 very specific buttons in here, so much different than the mouse I use, my Logitech here. Very, very different. This is a little bit older one. It actually still plugs in, but the individual is able to actually control the mouse just by the same way they could use a wheelchair, if that would make sense. And the mouse goes wherever that's going to go. And that could be positives and negatives, right? That could make it easier for someone to use, or it could make things more difficult to actually navigate to based on what the design is for the website. So just keeping this in mind, that there's going to be alternative ways. There's a spectrum of things that are opportunities for individuals to use things to access this information. I'm going to go ahead and I'll share this presentation real quick and get this going here. And let's see, are you guys seeing the presentation or are you seeing the... Apologize. I'm seeing fine motor control. Okay, you guys seeing that okay? You want to hop on? Give me a heads up or a yes or a no.
We can see it, Nick.
You can see the presentation okay?
Yes.
Okay. So then we'll move on here. Which one are you seeing? Are you seeing PowerPoint or are you seeing the slideshow?
I'm seeing the slide that says cognitive learning disabilities. Distractibility.
Okay, so what if I do this right here? Do you still see? And I was just curious if you're seeing the subtitles.
We're seeing it in a presenter format, I think.
Yes.
So you're seeing it in presenter mode. Okay. All right. Give me just 1 second here. And get out of there. Okay, how about now? Cognitive learning disabilities, distractibility, and recall challenges?
Still in presenter mode.
Still present? Oh, that's interesting. All right, well, I have no idea what is going on here. I think it's because I have multiple slides going. Okay, so we'll just stick with that. So you won't be able to use the see the subtitles, but anyways, we'll move on to cognitive. And one of the things we talk about with cognitive disabilities is a lot of things going on. There's an option that you have in Microsoft, or excuse me, in most platforms, whether that's Microsoft, iOS, Chrome, whatever you're using for a web browser or for anything online. You can actually declutter everything that's available, that's on that website. So if you're talking about automatic ads, if you're talking about videos that are playing, if you're talking about roller signs essentially across the website, you can actually clean that up and make it so that way it's just going to be the text and the important information that you want to get. And that's what coming from is, you know, things like autism, things like ADHD, any kind of disability that's going to really mess with your attention and have any problems with easily distractibility and things like that, including, you know, contents like jargon, using jargon or words that aren't I know I have a problem with this myself, but words that aren't really part of the English language, right? They're not correct. Things like acronyms and abbreviations. We want to try to avoid that stuff and use as much plain language as possible. And we'll get into that plain language, but we just taking into consideration how someone's actually going to interact with this information that you're posting on the website and how difficult it could be for someone depending on the spectrum of disabilities they could have or diagnoses, right? So it's not necessarily about building it for any one specific person, but taking all of these things into consideration and creating something that's going to be accessible to everyone.
All right, and I want to just take a moment there and let everybody digest that as I prepare the next portion of this screen share. I do want to prepare people that you will hear my screen reader through your speakers. This time I've, to this point, have been presenting where you've only been able to see the slides and hear me or see the captioning as well. And now I'm going to set it up so you will also hear the screen reader. And I want to give people an opportunity to ask questions about assistive technology. So I'm going to mute and stop my video. And if you have questions about assistive tech, that I'm sure that Nick will be able to field them as I prepare this part.
And just to give some people a little bit of background as well in there, Lena, she's really, really good at what she does when it comes to computers and to not only demonstrating how she uses something, but demonstrating how you can go about using
Screen
something.
share.
So you can hear now, she's got her voiceover program running. This is JAWS. And she's simultaneously sharing her presentation. She's got Zoom running. She's got JAWS running in the background.
Video now started.
Then she has ways of muting JAWS just so that she can hear it, but yeah, you can still pick up her microphone. There's a lot of tech stuff that goes into this, and like I said, she really does know what she's doing here. And our hope is that you can see someone who knows what they're doing. You can ask any questions you may have, and it'll give you a little bit better idea of what someone with a disability, how they might be accessing your content.
On task switching, PowerPoint slideshow dash understanding the slide.
We do have a question from Annabeth. Is there a button to minimize distractions on this screen? And I'm just going to click here, Annabeth, and answer live. Yes, I mean, there's a lot of options. It really depends on what you're using. Like I said, if you're going to be on iOS, which is, you know, Apple products, if you're going to be using a Windows computer, if you're using Chromebook, it really depends, right, on how you're going to use it or what you're using to get rid of the distractions. But yes, I mean, like I said, there's plugins that, you know, completely remove any kind of ads. It's just a simple ad block. There are plugins that remove any kind of automatic screen play or video playing or sound. So that way, when you get to a website, you don't have to worry about that automatically playing, right? There's things that you can use to actually put a screen cover on. So that way, the plugin will make it so that your screen only allows you to see a certain amount of lines on your actual monitor. So there's a lot of options, but yes, there's absolutely, it depends on how you'd like to go about doing it. And that's why give Lane or I an email, shoot us an email or give us a call. And we'd be happy to show you that or send you some resources on how to do that, depending on, like I said, depending on the platform. So absolutely.
Heading level. You are muted. Press Alt, PowerPoint slideshow, task switching,
Okay,
meeting
I think
controls.
we are good to
Mute.
go here.
All right, I had myself muted. Apologies. So, Nick, I cannot remember. Did we share?
PowerPoint slideshow dash understanding the
I
slide.
apologize. Once Jaws is talking, I got to remember that I cannot keep talking. This part is always a challenge. But did we share the drive link to the folder for our PowerPoint?
You know,
So-
now that I think about it, we have not. So I'm going to send that to all panelists just to give you guys that. I apologize. It is in the
Nick
chat.
Stallings to every.
And if that can be sent to our audience members by chat as well, that way they could follow along if they chose to. Again, I apologize, we did not do that at the beginning. I don't know why I skipped that. But now we're going to start kind of bridging the gap. So we've talked about the assistive technologies that people with disabilities might be using. Yesterday, we talked a lot about the environment in which they're using them in. And it's important to remember that people with disabilities have a variety of tools and strategies available to them, but those tools and strategies are only as good as the environment in which they're being used. So that's why we've been talking so much about, yesterday we talked so much about the different environments. So how do we start bridging that gap between the environment, your web page, your web app, your social media content, and the tools that people with disabilities are using?
Slide 9 dash the power of text. Heading level 1 the power of text. Text.
So the power of text. This is huge. For anything that you see, there needs to be a text equivalent. So even though you can see the text on the screen right now, but if you were a screen reader user, unless you opened up the presentation on your own computer, that's not text. It's just a video stream of the text that's on my screen. So when we talk about a virtual presentation like this, someone who's blind isn't going to be able to see the screen share. So again, I apologize. We almost always get that link out to the Google Drive so people can access and follow along on that PowerPoint so that they have access to that text if they need it throughout the presentation. You can accomplish the same thing for a lot of audio. Transcripts, closed captioning, it's a text representation of the audio. And your real-time live captioner will also be able to identify speakers and relevant background sounds where automatic captioning will not. And again, we'll dig into that more on Thursday. I'm going to let the screen reader read the rest of the text on this slide, make sure I didn't miss anything.
Bullet text dash to dash speech tools can synthesize it into speech for those who can see it, or who have learning disabilities that make it difficulty to comprehend.
We missed a spelling error, because difficulty is actually a word, but it should have been difficult. So your text-to-speech tools, they'll read out text as long as it is actually text, like I was saying.
Bullet allows those who cannot hear audio content to read it.
It's going to allow those who can't hear your audio, read it.
Bullet allows those who have difficulty challenges listening and focusing at the same rate as spoken language review at their own time/pace.
And anybody who has difficulty focusing, following along, different options make it more possible for them as well.
Slide 10 dash where is text? Heading level text question.
When we think about where is text, we think of the obvious things like the text of a blog, the text of a news article. There should also be a text alternative or alt text for images, and there should be text in other places as well, like I said, for the transcripts and closed captioning.
Slide 11 dash looks are deceiving. Google.
If you
Google.
joined us yesterday, you may be familiar with this slide and this part of the presentation, but it's important to remember that looks can be deceiving. Visually on the video stream, you can see the text. Looks are deceiving on the left. It's white text on black background. And then on the right, there is black text on a white background. Even for someone who actually is following along in the PowerPoint presentation and using text-to-speech tools like JAWS, like I am, is not going to know what that text is on the right-hand side because
Slide 11. Google shape semicolon 160 semicolon G97 CC 96B 515 underline 3 underline 0 image.
it's an image. And we get a lot of extra information from all of that. The only real information that somebody with a screen reader or text-to-speech is going to get from this slide that's going to make any sense at all
Heading level 1 looks are deceiving.
is the text that looks are deceiving. When I move to the next slide,
Slide
which
12.
visually looks exactly like the previous slide, we have an alt text with that image. So now we get more detail.
The issue with web accessibility is the fact that blind and visually impaired people need the single biggest boost to achieve equivalence since the real world image. Web is a visual medium. Joe Clark image.
So the World Wide Web is a visual medium, and this whole statement applies across the board here. Screen reader users do need the biggest boost because our web-based is primarily visual. And so we use that as our primary example, but now you can see that as a screen reader user, I'm now getting the full experience, including that image text now. But that took a little extra effort on our part to add alt text to that image.
Slide 13. The power of organization and structure. Head structure.
Now, we've got another tool at our disposal, organization and structure. When you look at a physical newspaper, you've got different font styles that tell you of different sections, sports, weather. You've got headings that tell you, the headlines of each of the stories within that section. And the same thing needs to be true on the web. But if you can't see the text formatting, you can't see that it's larger, you can't see that it's more bold, how do you convey that so that people can get that same experience of skimming headlines? And the way you do that is through organizing the information and using structure. And it's called programmatic structure. It's something that is built into the program that is used to create the content. So when we talk about Word documents, for example, which are often the sources for PDF files, which a lot of businesses and organizations share. So I'm just going to use this as an example today, but it also applies to websites, headings on websites, heading 1, heading 2. So if you've done coding and built websites for your business or organization, so that may be a familiar term. I'm hoping, and Nick or Christina, tell me when I switch over here if you don't see the Word document.
PowerPoint slideshow.
All right.
Example formatted docs. Example unformatted.
And if you have accessed the Google Drive folder, you may also find these documents in there. They are just sample documents. But we created a text version of our presentation. And when you look at this first document, unformatted, we've got all of the text in the document at the same font size. Under objectives, that is actually a whole paragraph. And then underneath that, you see some spots, and I'm hoping I'm scrolling. Nick, tell me if I'm not scrolling. But
You're good.
all right, so you've got some spots where there's white space to show that there would be new content starting. You've got some bulleted lists. When we talk about organizing this information, I'm going to look specifically at objectives.
Understand. Store objectives.
When we look at our objectives, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to read it as a paragraph. We can reorganize this by breaking it out into list items.
Store objectives. Understand how at least 3 different types of disabilities impact an audience. Objectives. Understand how at least 3 different types of disabilities impact an audience member's ability to access and engage with digital content. Identify the most powerful audience. Identify.
That probably looked like it was on its own line previously.
Divide for disabled audience members. And comma for this audience member. N.
So now we've got those 3 distinct list items visually, but we can further visually distinguish them and programmatically distinguish them as being lists by formatting them as a list.
Identify.
So I'm going
Understand.
to select all 3 of those paragraphs.
Understand. Identify them. And comma. Develop it.
I'm going to go to home and click on our bullets.
Lower ribbon. Leaving menus. Bullets table. Bulleted comma. Solid circle.
We'll go a solid round.
Lower ribbon. Ribbon. Home tab. Alt.
And now we've better organized that data, those objectives, into a list that is more easily recognizable visually, but it's also programmatically a list. So as a screen reader user, I have greater access to that. The next thing we're going to look at when it comes to structure is headings. Right now, all the text is the same size, so it's not really as easy to see where new content should begin.
Level 0.
I'm going to change the heading, the title font.
Understand. Storefront to web.
And I'm going to just
Font colon. Italic. Regular.
bold.
Italic. Bold. Size colon.
I'll make it
Edit.
20-point font.
Edit. Understanding.
You know, I've done that visually, so you have.
Aligned left. Centered.
Yep, we'll leave it centered. We've done that visually, so now it's pretty easy to see, but we can take it one step further to programmatically structure that as a heading by going to the home tab up top and then
Lower
down to
ribbon.
styles.
Styles table. Normal.
And I'm going to choose heading 1 for this style.
No spacing. Heading 1.
And I'm going to do that because this is the main topic of this document.
Leaving menus.
Oops, did it change my fonts? I don't want it to look like that, do I? I can fix that. I just did an undo. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to go back to home.
Lower ribbon.
Styles.
Normal. No space. Heading 1.
Over to heading 1, and I'm going to right click it.
Menu. Leaving. Modify. Update
I'm
heading.
going to say update heading style to match selection.
Leaving menus. Leaving.
So now I've applied the structure and I've made it look the way I want it to look. So I've done kind of killed both 2 birds with 1 stone.
Level
there.
1.
I'm going to go down to what would be my next section.
Bullet. Level 1 period dash bullet. Level 0 period. Types of disabilities.
So our first section was types of disabilities. So this is kind of a subtopic. We're going to make this a level 2 heading. I'm going to format it first,
Types of
just like I did before.
Font. Italic. Bold italic.
I'll just
Bold.
make it bold
Size colon.
and 16.
Edit.
And then I'm going to structurally make it a level 2 heading. So I'm going to go to home
Lower
and
ribbon.
styles,
Style. Heading 2 button.
over to heading 2 and right click it
Menu. Leaving menu.
and click the update style to match selection.
Leaving menus. Leaving.
I'm making this document easier to navigate now. So say I wanted to, in this document where it's not formatted, I wanted to get to the slide on the deaf and, or the information about the deaf and hard of hearing. I would have to
Auditory.
go through each of these lines of text or paragraphs of text one at a time. I don't have, just like you don't have at this point, any visual indicators. I don't have any programmatic indicators that would let me get there.
Motor. Cognitive. Visual. Information.
If I switch over here to
Task
my
switching.
example, my formatted
Example.
example though,
Quick keys on.
I can jump.
Heading 1 storefront to heading 3 visual. Heading 3 auditory deafness
I
and
jumped
quick keys.
straight to
Auditory
my text on auditory impairments.
Level 1 period bullet information. Level 2 period white bullet left.
So you can see how that heading structure made it easier visually to identify and to skip around the document, but it also gave me that same experience as someone who's using a screen reader.
PowerPoint slideshow dash understand PowerPoint.
Right.
Slide 14 dash define structure.
So we just did the define structure, and I know I walked through that pretty quick. I'm hoping to work through this because we are going to be short on time.
Slide 15 dash mark language changes.
One of the other important things is to mark your language changes. You might have in the middle of a document or a web page a phrase in a different language. Text to speech, including that is used by people with cognitive impairments, like the read aloud feature in Adobe Reader, for example. It will try to pronounce things in the language that is programmatically set for the document. I'm going to switch back here to
PowerPoint slide. Microsoft Word doc example formatted docs dash.
I want her formatted. And I'm jump.
Quick keys on. Heading 2 bridging the divide.
You see how I'm leveraging these headings.
Page 2. Heading 3 the power of text. Heading 3 where is text. Heading 3 looks are deceiving. Heading 3 the power of organization. Heading 3 define structure. Heading 3 mark language changes. Quick keys off.
All right, so I'm in the text now. I'm where
Level 1 period head. Level 3 period black small square left quote we are going to have palo con queso for dinner period right.
So I'm going to select the text that I just had the screen reader read, just so you can visually follow along
Black
a little
small
bit more.
square left quote we are going to have palo con queso for dinner period right quote.
But the sentence is we are going to have pollo con queso for dinner. Pollo con queso being a Spanish phrase, but I'm going to let you listen to that again.
Level 3 period black small square left quote we are going to have palo con queso for dinner period right quote.
It's saying pollo as palo, and queso it's saying differently as well. I don't do so good mimicking it here, but we can change that so that the screen reader reads it appropriately.
We are going to have palo con queso.
So it's saying con instead of cone as well, but I'm going to go up
Lower
to the review tab.
Insert
Maybe.
layout tab.
There we go.
References, mailings, review tab. Alt
And
followed
I'm
by
going to go over to the language dropdown.
review. Thesaurus, word, speed, access, menu, translate, language submenu. Leaving
I'm going to click the option to set proofing language.
language preferences, set proofing, leaving menus, menu, language sub.
There's a list of different available languages. I'm going to pick one.
English, Spanish left, paren Mexico right.
And there's different Spanish, you could do Spanish, España for Spain, or I believe it even has Castilian Spanish. So if there's a specific difference, I'm going to select that.
Edit. Level.
And now.
Pollo. Have. Level 3 period black small square left quote we are going to have. Pollo con queso. For dinner period right.
The screen reader said or pronounced pollo and con queso all correctly this time. And it did it in a slightly different voice. So it really drove home that point that it changed the language and it changed the experience. If your first language was Spanish and you were working with a document that had been machine translated, but the document language was English and you were listening to the Spanish text in English pronunciation, it wasn't going to make a whole lot of sense. So it's another very important tool at your disposal there, being able to change the language.
PowerPoint. Slide 16 dash the power of plain language.
This is where I want to turn it over to Nick. So you guys just give me a second to get
PowerPoint's meeting controls. Mute your.
There we go. We've stopped screen share and I'm going to turn it back over to Nick to go through plain language.
Okay, I did some changes here. We should be able to see the power of plain language now. Just want to make sure. Does that look okay? Oops, looks like I lost screen share here. Christina, does this show? Let's pull it up. Okay, are we seeing it now?
I'm seeing in, yep, you're up.
Okay, awesome. All righty, and I should have, oh, okay, hold on, of course. Now you can see, now I forgot to turn off my subtitles last time I was presenting here. So I'm gonna go up here and turn off always use subtitles. So there we are. Okay, so plain language, we mentioned it a little bit, but one of the things I think we forget in our presentations, everything that we do, is that, you know, most things that are meant for the public are written at about a 7th grade reading level. And so it can be important to remember that to use plain language, especially when we're creating our own content and putting it online, that it probably is going to be a little bit higher than most people are reading, you know, most of the public. And plain language is helpful. It can simplify the message and make sure that your message is reaching a larger audience. So we'll see, we'll go ahead and continue on here. So to give you some good examples of plain language, good and bad differences, right? So a bad example of plain language would be, I purchased a mammalian domesticated pet of the canine variety on this very day. Well, obviously no one speaks like this, but it gives you a good example compared to something good. I bought a dog today. And should really make you think about what's important in your message and what is really frivolous and what shouldn't be there or isn't really necessary versus what you're actually trying to get across. What's the point? So we'll move on here. So plain language principles include using logical orders with important details first. You know, just like we have heading level 1, we have a title, we have a subtitle, we have heading level 1, heading level 2, things like that. You want to start with the most important stuff and work your way down. You want to use an active voice. Make sure you're engaging people in the way you're actually writing. You want to use familiar language, and that goes back to that 7th grade reading level, 7th and 8th grade reading level, right? We don't want to be using words that some people don't understand or can't access. And then, like we had mentioned, marking language changes, especially in the document, right? And that can make a huge difference just in a screen reader. So regarding logical order and things like that, you want to front load content, right? So you want the most important details first. So to give you an example, we have an introduction to the accessibility of visual content will be offered tomorrow at 1 p.m. I think it's at noon p.m., right? Or is it 1 p.m.? 1 p.m. tomorrow. But you could also say for more important things is tomorrow at 1 p.m. we're going to offer an introduction to the accessibility of visual content. If you're like me, schedules are way more important than the title of whatever it is you're doing. You just need to make sure that the time's in there. So adding that information about the date and the time can be more helpful. You want to front load that important content. Active voice speaking makes the call to action clearer and usually more relatable. You must register today to save your seat versus registration must be submitted by 5 p.m. to save a seat. You want to make sure that you have active sounds in your voicing or in your writing. Obviously that second one's probably going to be a little bit better and be more active in giving details, right? Using familiar language. Another thing you obviously want to use familiar language and fit it to the context and the members of your audience. It's just like you don't want to be using large physics words, when you're talking about general science classes or general space stuff for the public, things like that. You want to provide definitions for unusual words, acronyms, and abbreviations. You always want to give the word before the acronym if possible, right? You don't want to confuse people, and if it gets you the chance to actually educate your audience as you're providing them with the information that you'd like. So there's actually a whole website called plainlanguage.gov that's available that can really help people with their writing skills and to kind of tweak their messages and their way of approaching things for disseminating information. So they have an example. This is taken directly from the website. That's about the monthly due date. And at the top, we have the before, right? We have a very long sentence. I believe, yeah, it's one sentence. And I can go ahead, I'll read it out to you, and we can talk about the information. But we must receive your completed application form on or before the 15th day of the second month following the month you are reporting. If you do not submit your application electronically, or the 25th day of the second month following the month you are reporting if you submit your application electronically. So it's even tough for me to read to keep straight. I couldn't even tell you what I just read. But we have a perfect example down below of using plain language and your structure, right? So this is just a simple table. It's two columns by 3 rows. And it simply says, if you submit your form electronically or not electronically, we must receive it by the 25th of the second month or the 15th of the second month. It's pretty straightforward. There's no need for any frivolous information. It's easy to follow. How are you going to do it? You decide how you're going to be submitting that application, and then you'll have your due date, right? And this is this is what we're talking about with plain language and kind of adjusting your approach to how you're telling your information, right? How you're creating your information, and it could be anything from that text to parsing it down, right? Rewording text using smaller words to actually completely changing the text into something else, right? This is more of like an infographic than it is a text down at the bottom. So just things to keep in mind, things to consider while you're designing content and when you're creating content. And it can be helpful. So I think we're going to be, yeah, we're pretty good here on practice. So I think what we're going to do, and Lane, you can, go ahead and jump in with me. I thought we were going to try to get some input from everyone here. I just wanted to pull up Q&A. How easy is it? Oh, from Dana. We do have this at 150. Perfect. So how easy is it for a screen reader to read columns? So that's good. I'm going to go back here. That's one of the things that we could talk about getting more in depth about accessibility. If it's programmatically created, it's not too difficult for someone to use a screen reader to read a table. Having said that, if it hasn't been created correctly, you are going to run into some problems. One of the things, hopefully you can still see my PowerPoint here. One of the things we can show you is right here in PowerPoint here. You can see this is our top line, and what we call this is our header row. And essentially what it is to remind us what we are doing, or our header row. So remind us what's going on in our columns. So anything below this if you submit your form is going to be defined by this top header row. And Lane can explain it probably a little bit better than I can, but the idea is that if there was more than, say, the 2 rows we have here, and you forget what column you're in and why you're in this column, the idea is that you can use your screen reader to remind you, right, to say you're in this header row if you submit your form, and then these are the options underneath the header row. Same thing talking about we must receive it by. 15th of the second month isn't really telling you much unless you know that you're in the header, you're in the column, we must receive it by, right? So if you can look here when you highlight it up here at the top left here, you have the header row option. And so simply selecting that and deselecting it is going to give you that programmatically correct information for a screen reader to know, oh, this is the main content. This is what's dictating all of the information below this table. And so it's helpful. It's extremely helpful. And Lane's shown me before where you can get down into, 15 rows, 16 rows, and then get down to the 12th row and not remember what column you're in. Because you have to memorize all of that unless there's a way to set it up so that way your screen reader can easily retrieve that information for you, right? And that's using keystrokes and things that we won't get into. So I wouldn't say that it's difficult, but if it's Dana, but if it's not done correctly, it definitely is.
Nick, it can also depend on the device that's being used. For example, it's a lot easier for me as a screen reader user to access content in tables when I'm on a computer versus on a mobile device. Just the nature of how those screen readers, the difference between how it works on a computer versus how it works on the iPad, for example. It is a very different experience. So that can also play into, when you're considering your audience, think about the majority of your audience and what devices they might be on. You think about viewing a table on a smaller screen for anybody is a little tricky. So just something else to keep in mind as well.
And of course, as much as we hate to admit this, depending on the device, everything's different, right? And that's the thing with accessibility, is it's not as cohesive as it can be, but that's why we're doing this work. We're trying to get it there, until one day that there won't be so much variation. But this is usually our best, these things, these ideas, these suggestions are usually the best practice. This is what we have the best available to us right now. There are obviously always caveats and little asterisks for those things, but these are things that you can keep in mind that's usually going to cover your bases. And then I did want to say, let's see, I saw a chat here from Jen. Jen's really dug the example. She's got a degree in technical writing, and yes, we agree. I mean, and a lot of people don't think about this stuff, right? It's easy, especially when you're a content creator, to be so involved in what you're doing that you completely forget that not everyone might know what you're talking about, might not be able to keep up, might not be as educated as you. So it's important to keep those things in mind. So we'll move on to the practice here. I don't know how, we got 5 minutes left. We could go a little bit over. But I thought we would do is try to get some information from the chat, correct, Lane?
Yes, so anybody who'd like to participate in the text chat, Nick, if you want to bring up the first exercise example. And I got these examples for these exercises off of plainlanguage.gov as well. This first exercise would be focused on changing ambiguous phrasing.
Yeah, so we have just a statement here. This regulation governs disaster assistance for services to prevent hardship caused by fire, flood, or acts of nature that are not provided by FEMA or the Red Cross.
The idea is, and feel free to put in the text chat how you would rephrase this so it was a little less ambiguous. And I know this will take a moment for people, so we may have a moment of quiet here.
And we are okay with uncomfortable silences. No problem there. Come on, we got to have one suggestion for us here. How can we make this? This regulation governs disaster assistance for services to prevent hardship caused by fire, flood, or acts of nature that are not provided by FEMA. Of course, we don't know what FEMA is, or the Red Cross. So I'm not seeing anything. I'll go ahead and give you a couple more seconds here. We'll just move it on. We do have some suggestions for you next. That is a toughie, I agree, Jen. We try to make you earn it around here.
And keep in mind, you can reorganize the information, not just make the wording less ambiguous. Consider how organization could assist with this as well.
James has got a good one. I agree with you, but Annabeth, we can talk about what the regulation actually is. I mean, there's not a lot going on there, right? That we have no clue. James, disaster assistance for services that are not provided by FEMA or Red Cross, fire, flood, and acts of nature. I like that. So we'll just go ahead. I'll continue on here. I'll hit the next one. What if you just broke it up, right? This regulation governs disaster assistance that consists of services to prevent hardship caused by fire, flood, or acts of nature, and is furnished by a provider other than FEMA or the Red Cross. But yeah, I really like your guys' suggestions as well. Changing, putting in more clarity on what we're talking about, the regulation, completely changing around the actual verbiage. And then going back, what if you completely change your layout? What if it's not even a block of text anymore? It's something that's like a table or something similar, right? More of like an infograph. Okay, I'm going to move on to this last one. So this one's more focused on wordiness. And I started reading this earlier, and I actually had to double check Lane when we were double check. I said, there's no way she's actually got this from plainlanguage.gov, but she did. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. It's funny that they have it. If a deponent fails to answer a question propounded or a party upon whom a request is made under section 4.7, or a party on whom interrogatories are served fails to adequately respond or objects to the request or any part thereof, or fails to permit inspection as requested, the discovering party may move the administrative law judge for an order compelling a response or inspection in accordance with the request. Holy moly, talking about, no, I'm not a lawyer. This is why nobody can get away from tax laws exactly like this. Everyone's broken the law under taxes. But this is a big one.
I'm guilty of wordiness, but this one made me giggle.
Exactly, I agree. Annabeth, we just start over, scrap it and start over. That's what I would do. There we go.
Yeah.
Columns, that's a good suggestion. Take a look. We're right at 2 o'clock, so we'll just go ahead and jump on next to. But yeah, I mean, you're correct. This is what we would suggest is breaking it up. Maybe
We front loaded this content by moving the statement about changing the administrative law. We bumped that to the top. We front loaded that content. So we were then able to break it out into bullet points.
Yeah, and I like that, Jen. She had pretty much the same approach there, and so essentially the same fixes, right? For two very different problems. You were there. I'm sorry, we're trying to get you guys out of here there. We don't want to take up too much of your time, but this is just stuff to make you think, right? Consider this stuff. And it's tough. It's really tough to put yourself in someone else's shoes. I understand that, but we're hoping that's where we can help you out. We're hoping we can give you examples of how to look at things differently. And like I said, we know it can be difficult, but it really does make things more accessible to everyone, which reaches a wider audience for you. And it really benefits everyone. It raises that floor, right? Lane, did you have anything else you wanted to add for wordiness?
No, just keeping in mind that using plain language, adding text where you might have an image or an audio file, those are things that you can be doing to your digital environment to help bridge the gap to your assistive technology users, but not just them, all of your users. Just like we talked about yesterday, oh gosh, I cannot remember that quote all of a sudden, but what might be done initially for someone with a disability ultimately benefits more than just that particular group of people. So a lot to keep in mind. Thank you everybody for joining us. I apologize, we've gone over a couple minutes. I would like to remain available if there are additional questions or further discussion, and you can always reach out to Nick or I individually. Our contact information should be included in your packet, and if not in your packet, it's certainly at the end of the presentation in that Google Drive folder.
And we do have a poll for you.
Thank you to Lane and Nick and the interpreters. And after this, there is going to be a short little survey, so please take that. Thank you, everyone.